All right, good afternoon, all. Further, obviously, to what the Secretary General just said on the 100 days, Philippe Lazzarini, our Commissioner General of UNRWA, was in Gaza yesterday. In a statement, he said that the past 100 days have seen the largest displacement of the Palestinian people since 1948. Overcrowded and unsanitary UNRWA shelters have now become quote-unquote home for more than 1.4 million men, women, and children. In those shelters, they lack everything from food to hygiene to, of course, any privacy. The Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, said that what had been unfolding in Israel and the Occupied Palestinian Territory is a war conducted with almost no regard on impact for civilians. Mr. Griffiths also noted that the families of the hostages have been waiting for the release of their loved ones for at least 100 days, or at least some information about their well-being. Unfortunately, he said, since November, no hostages have been released, and he reiterated his call for humane treatment and immediate release of all hostages. Meanwhile, the heads of the World Food Program, UNICEF, and the World Health Organization, in a joint statement, said today that getting enough supplies into and across Gaza now depends on more trucks being allowed through border checks every day, fewer restrictions on the movement of humanitarian workers, guarantees of safety for people accessing and distributing aid, and the opening of new entry routes. The agency said that it is critical that Israeli authorities allowed aid agencies to use border crossing points in northern Gaza, as well as a working port close to the Gaza Strip. Access to Ashdod port in Israel would enable significantly larger quantities of aid to be shipped in and then trucked directly to badly affected areas in northern regions of Gaza, which few convoys, as you know, have been managed to reach. And just to keep you updated on your expected question on where Sigrid Kaag is, I can tell you that she was in Jordan yesterday and early this morning. She has now arrived in Cairo in Egypt, and she'll be visiting Al Arish in the north, obviously near Rafah, and we'll keep updating you on her travels as we get information. Also, just to announce to you some travels by our Secretary General. He will be leaving tonight to attend the World Economic Forum in Davos, in Switzerland. On Wednesday, he will be delivering a special address on the state of the world, where he will highlight two existential threats to our planet: the climate crisis and the development of artificial intelligence without any guardrails. He will warn leaders that geopolitical divides are preventing us from coming together around global solutions to these threats and causing people to lose faith in governments, institutions, financial and economic systems. The Secretary General will call on leaders to prevent further damage by pushing for reform of our systems, of our institutions, and rebuilding trust to get our world back on track to safety, prosperity, and peace. While at the forum, the Secretary General will be meeting have bilaterals with various international leaders and also leaders from the private sector. We will update you on those bilaterals as they happen. Thursday, he will head to Thun, also in Switzerland, where he will attend the annual retreat of all his special representatives, heads of peacekeeping missions and political missions. Couple of things I also wanted to share with you. On Guatemala, the Secretary General congratulates President Bernardo Arevalo of Guatemala on his inauguration. He welcomes that the democratic will of the voters has been respected and notes that the president's declared commitments to advancing peace, social justice, human development, transparency, and democratic reform. The Secretary General reaffirms that the United Nations stands ready to accompany Guatemala and Guatemalans in these efforts. Also, turning to Ukraine, we and our partners today appealed at an event in Geneva for a combined $4.2 billion this year to support war-affected communities in Ukraine, Ukrainian refugees, and their host communities in the region. We need $3.1 billion to help 8.5 million people inside the country and $1.1 billion to support 2.3 million refugees and their host communities. Nearly 2 years since the war's rapid escalation, 14.6 million people need humanitarian aid in Ukraine. That's about 40% of Ukraine's population. Some 6.3 million people have fled the country and remain refugees. Most of them have stayed in Europe. The Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Martin Griffiths, stressed at the event the profound impact of the war on children, saying that this alone should compel a collective effort to significantly increase humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. He also emphasized that the war continues unabated. The very fabric of Ukrainian society is under attack with devastating consequences. For his part, the High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said that although the plight of millions of Ukrainian refugees is no longer in the headlines, they still need our urgent support, adding that host countries continue to extend protection, including them in society, but many vulnerable refugees still need help. For its part on the ground, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that attacks are continuing across Ukraine. Yesterday alone, some 40 homes, several education facilities, and other civilian infrastructures were reportedly damaged, and several civilians injured in the front lines of Donetsk and Kherson regions. That's according to what national authorities are telling us. The recent wave of attacks underscores the devastating civilian cost of the war and with winter ratcheting up urgent need for life-saving humanitarian aid, and we hope that donors will contribute in cash generously to the appeal launched today. Let's go back to the Middle East. A couple of updates there. You may have seen that over the weekend, Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, issued a statement expressing his concern about the recent developments involving Yemen. He noted with serious concern the increasingly precarious regional context and its adverse impact on peace efforts in Yemen, stability and security in the region. Mr. Grunberg urged all involved to exercise maximum restraint and to prioritize diplomatic channels over military options and calls for de-escalation. He reiterated the Secretary General's call for all involved to avoid actions that would worsen the situation in Yemen, escalate the threat to maritime trade routes, or further fuel regional tensions at this very critical time. And our head of peacekeeping, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, visited the Truce and Supervision Organization in Jerusalem over the weekend, otherwise known as UNSO. In meetings with Israeli government and military officials, he discussed the work of the UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon, the disengagement observer force, and of course UNSO. He reaffirmed their commitment to implementing their mandates and their effort to prevent further escalation. As we had told you last week, he was in Lebanon and including in southern Lebanon to visit UNIFIL for himself. In his various engagements in Lebanon, he stressed the need for all actors to cease fire, recommit to Resolution 1701, and work towards a durable political and diplomatic solution. He, of course, as the Secretary General just did, warned of the risk of a larger and more devastating conflict increase with the continued exchange of fire each day across the Blue Line. Mr. Lacroix thanked all his colleagues in Lebanon who are working on these, in Lebanon and in the Middle East, the missions he visited, thanked them for their service for peace, and he's on his way back to New York. Moving on to Africa, our peacekeeping colleagues in the Democratic Republic of the Congo informed us that just wanted us to flag that on Saturday, the head of our peacekeeping mission there, Bintou Keita, held a press conference with Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the DRC, Christophe Lutundula, and that was focused on the disengagement plan jointly developed and agreed upon with the Congolese and government forces in November. Ms. Keita reiterated that we continue to work closely with Congolese authorities to accelerate the progressive and responsible disengagement of the peacekeeping mission from South Kivu while consolidating the peace gains. The SRSG informed that the first phase of the disengagement of MONUSCO has begun and will lead to complete withdrawal of MONUSCO by South Kivu by June 2024, together with the simultaneous strengthening of state authorities in the province. During this phase, our peacekeeping colleagues' bases in South Kivu will be handed over to the government, in line with usual standard practice. The next phases, which include MONUSCO's withdrawal from North Kivu and Ituri, will be based on careful assessment of the situation in these provinces, together with the Congolese authorities' evaluation of the first phase. And South Sudan, our emergency relief coordinator, Martin Griffiths, has handed out $10 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to support men, women, and children fleeing from Sudan to the neighboring country, South Sudan. The funds will be used to build shelters, offer cash assistance, build water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities, and support onward transportation for new arrivals who are currently staying at overcrowded transit sites. We are anticipating thousands of additional people may cross the border into South Sudan from Sudan over the next 6 months, stressing an already system that is already under stress. And just in the past month, more than 60,000 people have arrived in South Sudan following the outbreak of clashes in and around Wad Medani, Sudan's second largest city. And as of today, about 500,000 people have crossed into South Sudan since mid-April. And the UN Children's Fund said today that it is concerned about the survival of 96,000 children in Afghanistan impacted by the earthquake that struck the country over 3 months ago. It called for greater health care, clean water, and sanitation services amidst the harsh winter conditions. UNICEF has already done a lot in support of the victims in the aftermath, but much more needs to be done. They confirmed the rehabilitation work on destroyed classrooms will begin shortly. In the meantime, it has set up 61 temporary learning spaces, 61 child-friendly spaces, where almost 3,400 children, more than half of them girls, are able to continue basic education. We will have one of our half-baked quizzes today. This time we honor a particular bread because we are, quote, on a roll. Yes, these are all very, very bad jokes. In 2014, UNESCO inscribed lavash bread on its list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Lavash bread is known as a culinary tradition in which country?
South Caucasus. Armenia.
Who said Armenia? Alan, congratulations. South Caucasus. We don't thank geographical areas. We thank member states. So we thank our friends in Yerevan and Alan for participating in the Tournament of Champions. I will now take some questions. Alan, you played, you win.
Maybe you could uncover just in a couple of words the working plan of the ESG during the Davos Forum. Especially I'm interested in his bilateral meetings. Is he going to meet some Ukrainian officials?
There will be a number of bilateral meetings, and the reason I'm not listing them because Davos is a complicated place to schedule meetings, so things are being done as we will be finalized once he's there. But obviously, it's an opportunity for the Secretary General to meet with senior government leaders that will be there, and of course, some members of the private sector, notably on issues of artificial intelligence and social media. But as soon as I have details, I will share those with you. Gabriel.
Thank you. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi yesterday said that he's calling for an international peace conference dealing with Gaza and Israel, and a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry called on or said that they would support the UN's role in this. Has the Secretary General had any conversations with China at any level about this yet?
Not in the last few days that I'm aware of.
Presumably, Secretary General would welcome this and engage in
I
this
think.
process.
Listen, I think it is obviously. I think the United Nations has a role to play, given the number of resolutions, General Assembly, Security Council resolutions dating back to the creation of State of Israel that have been violated, but that also support the legal framework for the two-state solution.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. The Secretary General in his comments mentioned something about when aid convoys are held up and one item is not allowed, the whole convoy needs to be rechecked again, basically. Those aren't, he said it more eloquently, obviously. Is that, that seems like a big problem, and the fact that he mentioned that here in his remarks seems like he's quite concerned about that. Has the Secretary General or someone at the UN engaged with Israel about why they're doing this and how they can speed up the process?
You are correct, Gabriel. The fact that he mentioned it underscores the importance of the problem. We are continuously engaging with Israeli authorities, especially on the ground at the working level, to try to make this a simpler process, to try to make this a quicker process, to try to make this a more effective process. This is, of course, also within the remit of Sigrid Kaag.
So to develop on that question, how would you characterize, Steph, the relationship between the United Nations and Israel? We see the consistent criticism from the Israeli envoy directed not only at the person of the Secretary General, but the organization as a whole. The examples of the struggles we're seeing in terms of aid deliveries getting into Gaza at scale doesn't seem to be happening. So you talk about these communications that really don't seem to be delivering what the UN is seeking to achieve in Gaza. What does that say about the relationship between Israel and the United Nations today?
I'm trying to think of the one word, but maybe we'll use two: complex and challenging, right? We are trying to deliver humanitarian aid in the middle of a conflict, right? That is always a challenge. That is always dangerous, not only for those who are delivering aid, but also for those who are receiving aid. We're also trying to deliver aid in the midst of a conflict in a highly difficult political situation. Nothing about this is easy. But what I would stress, because you raised Israel, I think the lines of communications are open, right? But they remain, the relationship, I think, remains complex and challenging.
A question on the DRC. In terms of the withdrawal that we're going to see, I've read that it's about 2,000 troops by April that will leave MONUSCO. Which countries will be directly affected in terms of TCCs?
We'll try to get a bit of granularity on that, or you may contact our peacekeeping colleagues who would have more details. Thank you. Deji.
Complex and challenging, the relationship. Is that why the Secretary General still has no chance to talk with the Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Listen, we are. I understand the interest for that, but I think that is not
because that would be a big signal, right?
That is not the end all and be all. As I said, we have daily, and I'm sure probably hourly, discussions with Israeli counterparts on the delivery of aid in Gaza, on the situation in the West Bank. Ambassador Erdogan and Sigrid Kaag just had a meeting last week, which, by all accounts, was productive.
How's that meeting was productive?
I would say productive. As I don't know if you were here on Friday, but I did say that Ms. Kaag had received a visa to go to Israel, so she will go to Israel in the near future.
But the ambassador Erdogan is also the one who said UN is the one who should sit in the trial in The Hague.
As I said, I'm not.
Listen,
the
open
you're welcome
statement
to speak.
is
You're welcome
not
to speak
different
to him.
from
And what I always say when people say the UN, I'll ask which UN are you talking about?
Okay. Sorry. One last question.
One more question.
No, maybe two more questions. I don't know.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
I'm just wondering where Mr. Torwesan is. His last tweet was 22nd of December, which is retweeting what SG said. His own words, that's November 27th.
He's in.
First
of all, he's been briefing the Security Council last week. He and Jamie McGoldrick, our humanity coordinator, met with the Minister Gallant, the Minister of Defense in Israel. So he continues his work and his interaction, and I know he's deeply involved in what is going on. Just because he's not tweeting doesn't mean he's not working. Okay, I will leave you because I don't see any questions. Oh, Abdelhamid, sorry. Oh, and sorry, you go first, and then we'll go to Abdelhamid.
Thank you. As you know, Bangladesh successfully held its general election at the beginning of this month in fair, inclusive, and transparent manner. However, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the main opposition BNP, tried to vandalize the election through their terrorist activities.
I need a recount of what happened. What is the question?
Just a second. They killed a large number
sir,
of people.
Sir, if you could ask me
Would you please share your comments on the BNP's terrorist activities during the national election of Bangladesh?
I think we were asked by one of your colleagues about the elections. I think our call, and I'll repeat what I said, is that we call on all parties to reject all forms of violence and to ensure that all human rights and the rule of law are respected.
Just follow-up. Does the United Nations consider killing people, setting fire to crowded buses and trains under the guise of a democratic movement as a violation of human rights?
Sir, we do not condone any violence, whether it is committed, regardless of who is committing it. Okay, Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I don't know. I think something wrong with my camera, but
I know what you look like,
question-
Abdelhamid. It's okay. And I recognize your
My
voice, so I
question
know
is
it's
about
you.
Okay. What happened last night around midnight? Settlers went into the town or village of Borin near Nablus, and they ransacked the whole town. They destroyed cars. They torched many places. And again, they are instilling fear in everyone in the village. Are you aware of that? Does any UN official know what happened last night at around midnight?
I have not, Abdelhamid, I have not seen these reports, the specific ones you're mentioning. We will look into them. But I think the Secretary General was very clear in his reference to the situation on the West Bank in his opening remarks.
Thank you.
All right. Mesdames, I see two mesdames. Mesdames and gentlemen, hasta mañana.